Good morning, everyone, and afternoon. Happy Friday. I am so glad to, oh no, Reba, no, we're not going to start out this battle to begin with. Oh my gosh. I felt like, whoa, all the comments coming through were so lovely, and now you have to go and ruin it with Christmas? Actually, the tech guy and my son have today flagged for Christmas movies, and my favorite, like I talked about on Tuesday's live, is Matt Nathanson is releasing his Christmas album today. So I might have to break my rule. Marie asked if it is cold in Ashland. It is cold in Ashland. I had to put on gloves and a hat for my morning walk this morning. It's also beautiful. Fall is in its full beauty, and there's that crispness to the air. It's dipping down into the 30s, so we had to bring our lemon tree inside. But I can tell you for sure that Ashland is nowhere near as cold as where my guest is from today. So I will let her talk about that in a minute when I bring her on. I'm so glad that some of you have already read and have her books on the way. That's so exciting. It'll be great timing. We'll have a chat today, and then hopefully your book will arrive and you can cozy up for an October weekend of reading. I do have my Tort mug today, but I am still nursing my writing and reading elbow injury. I know this is like such a tough problem, but it's true. I have like an elbow injury from writing too much. So I ordered this ergonomic pad, and I'm drinking with my left hand, which means that there's probably like a 78% chance that I'm going to end up spilling my coffee all over me this morning. Anyway, I'm so excited for my guest who's joining me today. She is truly a writer's writer. She is such a champion of writers in general, the mystery writing community. She is a former past president of Sisters in Crime, and her Spice Shop series, which she's going to talk about today, is set in one of my favorite places, Seattle. Shoot us a thumbs up or a heart if you know about Pike's Place Market. I mean, I think everybody does, right? But it's one of the most amazing places on the planet, I think. And I love that Leslie Budewitz, my guest today, set her series there. So without further ado, let's invite Leslie on. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so excited to have you here.
And I'm thrilled to be with you. I don't have a Tort mug, but I do have Seattle espresso in my cup. Let's see. Can I get it?
Look at that.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, so first, I can't complain about it being 30 in Ashland, because how cold is it for you right now?
Probably only about 30. We're near Glacier National Park in northwestern Montana, but we are forecast to get down into the single digits this weekend, which is really, I know, really crazy, right? And I just glanced out the window to see if there was new snow on the mountains. We had a couple of really terrible windstorms this last year, and we had several trees come down, quite a few trees. And I can actually now see the mountains out my office window, so that's pretty cool. I can see golden birch leaves and the dark green of the spruce and the fir, and yes, fresh white snow on those mountains.
Oh my gosh, it's October.
I know, it's crazy.
So crazy.
It's 2020, anything can happen, right?
Yes, absolutely. Miriam's saying she loves this series and the market. I mean, come on. Yes. Reba says the same. I love your series. Yay. Okay. So
thank you, Reba.
The new book just came out. Let's tell us a little bit. It's cold, but oh, Sue Smith got 7 inches of snow in the Twin Cities. Okay. 7 inches. Okay. There it is. Wow. Look at that. Solace of the Bay Leaves.
Solace of Bay Leaves.
So can you talk a little bit
about it, Ellie, or should I?
You should.
Okay. So the Solace of Bay Leaves is the 5th in the Spice Shop series, set in Seattle's Pike Place Market, where my main character runs a spice shop. It's not one of the real spice shops that actually exists in the market. I had to create my own so that I could kill people.
Go figure.
The title, The Solace of Bay Leaves, comes from a comment that Pepper, my main character, has made often. She says that when her life fell apart at 40, she never expected to find solace in bay leaves, meaning she didn't imagine that buying the spice shop, which was kind of an impulse thing, even though she'd loved it since she was a little girl. She never imagined that that would turn out to be one of the best decisions she ever made in her life. And it has been, and it's been a great one for me too, because I just love going there with her on the page. And I'm delighted to take readers on a tour of one of my favorite places.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone I see in the comments, I think a lot of readers are familiar with Pike's Place, but it's such a gorgeous spot. And you can do so much with all the seasons because, you know, in the summer it's packed,
Yeah.
in the winter it's soggy. I know both of us back in the day, one of my favorite bookstores, the Seattle Mystery Bookshop,
Yes.
that then closed, was such a cool spot too, because there's all that funky, you know, like old buildings where you have to go underground in downtown Seattle and the whole underground tour. So yeah, it's brilliant.
And the market is great because it was built in 1907, or it was opened in 1907, and the buildings mostly were built in the teens, 20s, and 30s. And so they're funky and old. And then in the early 70s, the voters of Seattle voted to save it and spend their own money, tax themselves to bring the market back to life. But it is on the National Historic Register. And so all those buildings had to be maintained as historic structures, but with modern amenities like electricity and eventually Wi-Fi and all that sort of thing. So it's restored, but it still feels and looks like it would have back in the early part of the last century.
So cool. That's amazing.
Fun. Also, as you say, there are so many nooks and crannies and hallways and passages and mysterious little places where mysterious things can happen.
You know it. Sue says, my husband and I just had a discussion about whether bay leaves are poisonous to eat or not. Ooh.
They're not if they come from the bay tree. There may be some shrubs called bay. Ooh. There's another shrub called bay that is not edible, but if you've got a real true bay tree, it is. Now, I can't grow one here, but Ellie could grow one in her yard. My best friend in Seattle has a pal who's got one, and she sends me little packets of leaves. And when I go visit, I go pay homage to the tree.
Yeah, we had one in our house in Portland, but we don't have one here in Ashland, so maybe we'll have to invest in a bay tree. I like that idea. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and I'm going to have you share your 5 things, and we were talking earlier about how hard it is to do this. So what's the first thing you want readers to know?
Well, so the first thing is why I write about Seattle and the Pike Place Market. Because obviously you can tell by what I've already said, I'm passionate about the place. I fell in love with it as a college freshman, and I won't even tell you how long ago that was. The market had not been long saved, and it was still really funky and weird then. And it's still funky and weird, which is part of its charm. But it's also always changing, and that's part of the fun. When I was a college student, I would go into the market and I would walk in at the corner where the newsstand is, although sadly the newsstand just closed. And and the Italian grocer, and they have a window where you can buy pizza. And I would buy a slice and stand in front of the newsstand, hands off until the pizza was gone, and then browse the magazines, mostly with my eyes. Then walk down the block a little bit, not very far, a couple hundred feet, to Market Spice, get a little cup of Market Spice tea, stand and watch the men throw fish, and then just wander. And I had a few places where I would stop for cookies, because of course a girl's got to have her cookies, right?
Absolutely.
And then, you know, it just became my mission to eat my way through the place. But because it's always changing, that's easy to do. So whenever I go back, usually once a year, but not this year, I find new and intriguing things there. When I was a young adult, right out of law school, working downtown Seattle in the mid and late 80s, I actually did a lot of my grocery shopping there. It's become a little more touristy now, and that's partly because grocery shopping has changed. We can buy arugula at Safeway now, and other interesting, unusual things are more available. But the market will always surprise you. You will always see fun and funky things down there that you will not have any idea what they are, how to eat them. But people will tell you. The vendors are just so knowledgeable and passionate about what they do, and that makes it so much fun. So why I love the market is my number one.
Oh, I love that too. You know, I have so many memories of in childhood of going up to visit family in Seattle because I grew up in the Portland area. And every time it was like a treasure hunt through the market. And my favorite food memory to this day are these chocolate pretzels that I've never been able to find again. It must have been a booth that was there in like the 80s. But I think even to this day, the other interesting thing about the market is, I mean, it's very European, like you're saying. You can go and you can get your cheese and your fish, but it's still relatively inexpensive for getting high quality produce and meats and specialty items too.
And it's so much fun. My late mother was a very shy, quiet woman, and she and I were standing in front of the fish market, and she was buying crab legs to take home. And the singing fisherman said to her, "So where are these going?" And she said, "Montana." And all of a sudden, these men are throwing fish through the air and they're yelling, "Crab legs for Montana." And my mother is not sure whether to be terrified or frightened or just laugh out loud. And ultimately she decided laugh out loud, because that's what you do when men are throwing fish around.
That's right. I love it. And also one thing that this makes me think of is this was like pre-Starbucks and everything too. You know, you wouldn't have just been finding
not really.
Good coffee anywhere.
The first Starbucks opened in the market in, I think, 1974.
Okay.
And it's still there. There's almost always a line outside the door.
Right.
And Pepper, my main character, jokes about it. She wove her way past the Starbucks line. In one book, it might be, it is this one. She actually slips into the line ahead of people who kind of glower at her because she's hiding from someone. And the Starbucks line is a good place to do that. There's one other nationally known company that started in the market and still has its flagship there, and that is the kitchen shop Sur La Table.
Sur La Table.
There are others, of course, that have their flagships there too, but those two date back to the mid-70s, and those are the original locations. And they're tiny and cramped and wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Reba says she's only been to Seattle once, and Pikes was a fun place to explore, but the gum wall was weird. So there is a gum wall if you turn just like right down the corner there.
Yeah, the gum wall it's pretty gross, actually. Yeah. A friend of mine calls it psycho grunge, and I like that. For people who don't know about this, I will tell you that it's a brick wall down in an alley next to the Market Theater. And people will take their gum out of their mouths and stick it on the bricks. And it's bright and colorful and really kind of gross. I think it was TripAdvisor, one of the big travel companies, named the gum wall the second germiest place in the world. And the first one is Killarney Stone in Ireland that people kiss. So
right. When our son was like 10, every time we would go, that's where he would have to go. He'd, get his wad and stick it on there. So not during COVID, maybe not a place to visit right now, right?
Maybe not right now, no. Every so often, the Public Development Authority cleans off the wall, mostly to save the bricks because they're old and soft. But it doesn't take long for the gum to build back up again.
Arzani says she bought Crouching Tiger action figures there that she still has. That's exactly what Leslie's saying, right? It's so quirky.
Oh, that's so cool. You were probably in one of the shops down under, as it's called, and you go down a long wooden ramp and you're down onto the second level or maybe even the third level below the street. And there's all kinds of fun shops down there. There's a Halloween shop called the Orange Dracula that is popular all year round, and a comic book shop. And all kinds of fun places down there.
Okay, such good information. And I feel like me, you know, setting a series here in Ashland, you don't really have to stretch your imagination too much. You have all this beautiful built-in material to, you know, riff off of basically when,
Yeah,
I mean, just those
yeah.
two stories alone. It's amazing. Okay, so moving on, what is your number 2?
Okay, so readers often want to know how much of the author is in the characters, particularly the main character. And since I write 2 series, I will tell you some truths about each of my main characters. My other series is the Food Lovers Village Mysteries, which are set in a small town in northwestern Montana. I call it Jewel Bay. Again, I had to change the name so that I could kill people and move things around a little bit, but it is very closely based on Big Fork, the town where we actually live. Actually, we live 6 miles outside of it in the woods, but there we are nonetheless. And so my main character there is Erin Murphy, who, as you can tell by her name, is half Italian. And she grew up in Jewel Bay, then left for college and eventually worked out in Seattle for a company that bears a strong resemblance to Costco. And then she comes back to Seattle, to Jewel Bay. And she's found that 15 years later, by golly, not only has she changed, which people don't expect, but the town has changed. And so that's kind of the fun. And where that relates to me is that I too grew up in Montana, left and went to Seattle. I also did a stint in Indiana in law school at Notre Dame, and then went back to Seattle to work for a number of years before I came back to Montana. So what I'm doing with Erin is exploring my own story, my own experience of coming back to the place where you grew up through the eyes of a much younger woman. And that's a lot of fun. So with Pepper, who's the main character in the Spice Shop series, she actually has a very different path than I do. She was born and raised in Seattle in this social justice community that's based on one I knew as a young woman living out there. And so it's kind of a commune. And she always says it's not, but it kind of was in the middle of the city. But instead of being organized around growing their own produce and raising their own chickens, it was around growing movements and raising heck and raising awareness and being involved in social justice activities. So she kind of grew up with a protest sign in her hand. And she's not really active in any movements now, but she is driven by that search for justice. And that part really does come from me and my own experience. And of course, she calls the market her happy place, and that part comes from me too.
That's really the gift of writing. I think we get to weave these parts in.
She calls herself the poster child for Life Begins at 40, and that's kind of my story too. So that's fun.
I love that. Okay. Love Erin and her family and the community. It was great interpersonal relationships with family and friends. Yes, that definitely comes through. That's awesome. Okay, moving on. What is your number 3? 3.
The things that I find myself writing about over and over and over. Of course, you always try to make each book stand alone and make them all different. But as Ellie knows, we end up writing about the things that we are most passionate about, whether it's food, the search for justice, the love of a particular place. Those things all come out in my books. But one of the things I've discovered is that I am always writing about women's friendships. That's really key to the Food Lovers Village, where we've got the friendship between Erin and her childhood friend, Kim. There was an estrangement. Now Kim is the deputy sheriff in town, and the two women have to basically find their way back to each other. In the Spice Shop series, Pepper has these 3 or 4 really good friends, and a couple of those relationships get seriously tested at various points in various books. One of them gets tested badly in Killing Time, the 3rd book, and then here in Solace we have another a test is really the best way to describe it. Identity and city neighborhoods and food. Those things just come out in this series over and over and over.
Which I think is one of the reasons they resonate with readers so much.
Yeah, a lot of the cozy mystery, which you and I write, are set in small towns, and that's great fun. But it's also possible to set them in a city. So the urban cozy, like this series, is based on a community within a community, and that's why the market is such a great place to write about. The first urban cozy series I read was Cleo Coyle's Coffee House Mysteries, and those are set in Greenwich Village. Well, that's one of the most densely populated parts of the world, right? And it's so packed and so full of life and interesting characters. And she really uses the coffee house as the center of the community. Our dear friend, the late Sheila Connolly, did something similar with the museum mysteries, which are set in Philadelphia in the small museums. There's a large community of small museums.
Those little ones, yeah, exactly.
Which makes sense when you think about the city and its history. And she used that community as a way to bring us into this city and explore it. And that's the sort of thing that I'm doing with Seattle.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. What is your number 4?
So people often ask me, since I am writing a series set in a spice shop, what is my favorite spice? Ooh. That's an absolutely impossible question to answer, but I will say my favorite spice discovery since I started writing this series is smoked paprika.
Oh.
If you haven't had smoked paprika, get some. You will love it. It's got that mild red peppery flavor of paprika, so it's more flavor than heat, which is one of the things we love about paprika, right? And then it's got that little smoky hint to it that makes anything you put it in taste like you made it over a campfire, like you're a Spanish paella cook or a Hungarian cook using the open fire. It's just absolutely delicious.
Okay, I kid you not. Just yesterday, I was writing a scene. I'm working on the next in the Bake Shop Mysteries, and I wrote a scene where Jules was making smoked paprika buttercream with a touch of honey. There you go. I haven't actually made it myself, but
I have that.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Oregano. Stacia says oregano. Yeah. I mean, come on, it's a classic. Yeah. You can't go wrong with oregano, especially with Italian background, right? Cumin.
Yeah. If you're going to just do 10, you would want to have, let's see, how many can I come up with? You're going to want to have oregano and thyme and basil and cinnamon. And I would have cumin. Not everybody would. Let's see, I'm up to 6. Nutmeg. Some kind of red pepper flakes. That would be, let's see, what am I at? 7. Black pepper, of course.
Classic.
I'm not going to count salt because it is not actually a spice. It's a mineral. And so then I'll give you 2 to play with, whatever would be most interesting and useful in your house.
I love that. I'm a big cardamom fan too.
Cardamom is great. Now, you'll also notice I didn't mention garlic because it's more of a vegetable, but also garlic on there. Cardamom is really fun in coffee and of course, in chai. And the book before this was called Chai Another Day. So
love that
we had
title.
a lot of fun with chai and with cardamom. And cardamom, even though you think of chai as a South Asian blend, cardamom is also really popular in, of all things, Swedish baking.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people use it in their Santa Lucia Day buns, their December 1st festivities in Sweden. And it's just really popular in cooking from that part of the world. I don't know why, but spice is The history of spice is fascinating. It is the history of exploration and conquest, and so sometimes there's some really difficult episodes in the history of spice. But it's also just a really intriguing thing to think about how some of these spices traveled around the world.
Yeah, and how, a few hundred years ago, we wouldn't have had access to many of these spices, and that spices were so valuable. I mean, more valuable than money in some cultures.
They were, and in fact, black pepper, which grows on trees, was used in some cultures as money. So when your father said to you that money doesn't grow on trees, he was wrong.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, last but not least, what's your number 5?
So my number 5 relates back to you, Miss. When I was a sophomore in college, a group of friends before up in Seattle, and we got in cars and we drove to Ashland, went to the Shakespeare Festival. And it's the only time I have ever been to Ashland or to the festival, but it remains a really vivid memory for me. It was just a wonderful, wonderful week. And we were looking through the program, and we chose a restaurant to go to for dinner. And we chose this Japanese town across from Lithia Park, which are all our stories. And we went there, and by golly, the place was closed. Actually, it was closed for business, but it was open because they were selling off all the dishes and tables and everything. And so let's see if I can hold this up and get a good. Each of the 10 or 12 of us bought little sake cups. And I still have mine years later, a long time, decades later. And I have been in that trip. All still got them. We've all still got these little blue and white sake cups as mementos of our trip to Ashland in our college days. And so that's one of my memories of where you live and where we all live.
That's so sweet. Ironically, there is now a Japanese restaurant across the street from Lithia Park again, and it's very popular, and it's one of our favorite spots. So who knew?
Oh, how fun. I wonder if it's in the same spot.
I know. Okay, now I have 5 very hard-hitting questions for you. I know. Get ready. It's scary. Okay, my number 1 question is, dun, dun, dun. What do you think has been the most unexpected thing about being a mystery writer? Now, before I brought you on, I alluded to the fact that you were a previous president of Sisters in Crime. You are a professional lawyer, so you have quite the background in terms of seeing crime from the other lens. So I'm very curious about your answer for this one.
So the thing that has most surprised me and delighted me about mystery writers is, and maybe this is because I have been a lawyer for 36 years, mystery writers are the most generous people I know. Writers in general seem to be quite generous, but mystery writers in particular are the kindest, most generous, helpful group of people I have ever met. If you need to run an idea by a writer, even if you don't know someone well, she'll spend half an hour on the phone with you brainstorming something. She'll give you a quote for the back of your book. Mystery writers promote each other all the time, just because we all realize that the more we help each other, the better the books, the more we get them into the hands of readers who love us so much and whom we love even more. And the generosity in the community is really the most unexpected and wonderful gift.
I totally agree. It's true. And you are such a champion of that, inviting younger people in and making sure that strength is there. So I love that. Okay. Number 2 is, what's the biggest myth about mystery writing?
So I'm going to say that it's not so much about the writing, but about the books, that they're about murder. They're not. They're about community and justice, particularly when we're talking about an amateur sleuth and a cozy. The murder it's the trigger, pun intended, but it is not really what the story's about. It's the way we get things moving, the way we get into the hearts and minds and emotions of the characters, and hopefully connect on that level with the readers.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's about that search for justice and restoring community.
So true. I have to segue just for a second because someone, I lost who it was, somebody wants to know if cilantro counts as a spice, because it's also an herb, right? It grows.
Yes.
Does that matter?
Cilantro is an herb, and herbs and spices can be referred to almost interchangeably. But the difference between them is that a spice is an herb is the leaves, and a spice are the parts. So, for example, cilantro would be called an herb because it's the dried leaves of the plant, but the seeds are coriander. Cinnamon,
Yes.
for example, is considered a spice because it's bark. Nutmeg is considered a spice because it's a nut. Oregano is considered an herb because it's the leaf. But, you can throw them all together and come up with a wonderful stew.
It's true. And Anna is very disappointed because she's in the middle of watching, but she just burned a batch of snickerdoodles. Oh no, the travesty. Go get them out of the oven.
Oh, no.
You can't burn the snickerdoodles. It's a good day for snickerdoodles. I like that. I'm going to move on. Yeah, really, that's true. I'm going to move on with my next couple, but I want to tell everyone who's on the live here with us, start thinking about your questions. If you have specific questions for Leslie, because there's a delay, so I will get to them after we get through my next couple. Okay, so number 3 is, I know there are quite a few readers on here who are making the transition into writing mystery novels themselves. What's your best advice for anyone who wants to write a mystery?
Well, you're already doing a really important thing. You're hanging out with other writers and readers, and you're learning from Ellie, who has, 24 books? 20-some books, and who really knows what she's talking about. So that's an important piece right there. You're joining the community of writers. The most important thing, though, simply is to read, and then to write, and then to repeat. Learn to read as a writer. You may find that for a little while, it takes away some of your enjoyment in reading, and don't worry, it'll come back.
Right.
But you need to read as a writer. One of the things that I often suggest that I don't hear other people saying is find a book that you really liked, a book you've already read, that's similar to what you want to write, and outline it. Take a couple of days and write by hand, because that's the best way to do this.
Totally agree.
Break it down by scene. Who's in each scene? What happens? Where? What's the timeline? And you'll begin to understand how a writer whose work you admire and want to emulate breaks things down, how they move the characters around, how many locations they have, just enough, not too many, not too few. And you'll get an idea of the cast of characters as well. You'll start to see what the scene structure looks like. So take a couple of your favorites and outline them, and you'll just be amazed how much you learn.
That's a great tip. Okay, number 4 is, if you had to pick any celebrity you would absolutely die to see reading your book, who would it be?
I don't know where this one came from, but Ina Garten, because, she's a food goddess, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I would just be thrilled to see anybody reading my book. A couple of times I have seen people reading it, and it's just been mind-bogglingly wonderful. But if I were to see somebody really famous, a celebrity, it would be a chef, and Ina in particular, because she just seems so approachable, and her food is so wonderful, and I just love how she talks about food and makes it part of our lives, just the way I try to do with the books.
And honestly, she's like my go-to queen for recipes. She is a food goddess. You're right. Nothing that I have ever made of hers has been, I mean, everything has been amazing. Every recipe. My favorite chocolate cake recipe of all time is hers. Yes, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. Okay, last but not least is number 5. This should be a slam dunk, but I don't know, maybe it'll be like the spice for you. What is the perfect drink and food item to pair? Let's talk Spice Shop with your Spice Shop series.
Well, anything that comes from the books, of course. There are recipes in the books. And what I always try to do with the recipe section is give you several recipes that feature the title spice. And so for the Solace of Bay Leaves, it's going to be soup, right? But there's also other recipes too, because Pepper cooks at home and she likes to find things fresh in the market and take them home and see what she can do with them. She's also part of a movie club, a group of women who call themselves the Flick Chicks. And so not all the chicks are the best cooks in the world, but 1 or 2 of them are very good. And so sometimes there are recipes to recreate the food from the Flick Chicks. So any of those would be fun. When it comes to spice and food, I'm all about the flavor. Sometimes people get a little concerned about spice because they have an idea that the word spicy means hot. And we do sometimes use it that way. But my focus is always the flavor. So as for drink, Pepper works in the market and lives nearby, and Seattle is known for coffee. Can I get this in the picture?
I know, right? It's like, okay, there we go.
So
Cheers.
coffee is the number one go-to. But of course, in the spice shop itself, they serve up market spice tea. And that works. Pepper loves a glass of wine, or sometimes 2. And if she likes to go out, if she goes out with her girlfriends, she might have a Cosmo, which is not actually a drink that I particularly enjoy, but she does. And, you know, that's a way in which you can celebrate with her too. So she's a flexible gal. You can do all kinds of things.
It's wide open. Okay, we're going to move on to some reader questions. Nicole Ruth is saying, what are some of your favorite reads?
My favorite
reads. Like, what are some of your favorite books? Yeah.
Yeah. So I read widely, not just mysteries and not just cozies. But I mentioned that I am fond of Cleo Coyle's Coffee House mysteries. And of course, I love the Bake Shop mysteries. I was a big fan of Sheila Connolly's County Cork series. And sorry, there won't be any more of those. When it comes to other novels or other crime fiction, I really enjoy Deborah Crombie's series set in England, and I adore the audiobooks of Spears' Maisie Dobbs series. And I say audio, I have read all but one of them in audio. I've only read one in print, but I've listened to the others in audio. And the narrator is absolutely fantastic. And she just really creates out in England.
That's awesome. Okay, Carolina wants to know, what was your first mystery book you ever read?
So I can't tell you the exact, but it would have been a Happy Hollister. The Happy Hollisters were 4 or 5 siblings, and they had these fun adventures, and they went to places like they went to the beach. Well, I don't have that. We have other wonderful things, and my only sibling is quite a bit older than I am, so I always thought it was really great fun to be 5 kids who were close and adventures together. It's like finders in a post office that was being torn down and then deliver the letters. And it wasn't crime. It was just mystery and fun. Those are some that I most remember.
That's great.
From childhood.
Anna says she loves the market spice tea. I would grab a box every time I went through SeaTac Airport.
Good choice. One of the fun things about SeaTac is that, and for those who don't know, it's short for Seattle Tacoma International Airport because it's between the two cities, SeaTac. They've done a great job having local restaurants in the market, or excuse me, in the airport.
Yeah, it's such a great airport. Jeannie says she loved the Happy Hollisters as a kid. I didn't know that one. I missed those. Trixie Belden was my sort of entry in.
Oh yeah, Trixie. In fact, you can see Trixie on the shelf here behind me.
Yes.
I had never read Trixie, and a reader thought I needed to read Trixie, and she sent me a book.
So sweet.
See how much I love you all, because you're so sweet.
I know. Now I'm thinking I'm going to have to go find a Happy Hollisters. Who knew? Okay, well, this has been such a joy and delight to have you share, Leslie. I love it. Let's see. Let's tell readers what's coming up so they can get the new book now. It's available. It was already out in ebook, but now it's available in book form. And then what else do you have in the works?
So the Solace of Bay Leaves, which I've been talking about, is out in paperback this week. And as Ellie said, the ebook and the audio were already out. And so it's great to see it out in the world as a paperback, especially with that wonderful night scene and the neon lights that both Pepper and I love so much. My next book will be out in April. It is called Bitterroot Lake. And I don't have my 5-second pitch for it down yet, what's often called the elevator pitch. What I can say is that when a newly widowed young woman returns to her family's Montana lodge, a historic Montana lodge, in search of solace, she finds more than she bargained for. And she reunites with a group of old friends. There's that theme of women's friendships again. And they have to, a new murder occurs that forces them to reconsider a tragedy that happened 25 years ago. And that, excuse me, is called Bitterroot Lake. It will be written under the name Alicia Beckman, which is the new me.
So this is a brand new series.
Yeah. It's actually a standalone.
Okay.
My first suspense novel and my first hardcover and first standalone.
Yay. Yeah. And that's going to be out in April.
That will be out in April from Crooked Lane.
How exciting. And obviously, once we wrap up our live here, I will share Leslie's info with everybody. But if people want to find you, you're on Facebook, you blog at Mystery Lover's Kitchen. What else?
And there's also a little blog on my own website, lesliebudewitz.com. And if you click on blog, you'll see I share a quote every Saturday, the Saturday Creativity Quote. And I've recently been offering Writer Wednesdays or Writing Wednesdays, where I will talk about something that has come up in my own writing life that I want to share with people, like dealing with a name or writing a particular emotion. Sometimes I talk about a reference book that I find particularly useful. So since so many of you are writing, that might be something you like. And you can find that at lesliebudewitz.com under the blog. You can also subscribe and have it show up in your email. And while I'm talking about the website, I should mention that newsletter subscribers get a free Food Lovers Village short story. So if you want to just get a taste, pun intended, of my other series, that's there for you. Also on the front page of the website is a free download for one of my historical mysteries, which, let's see, the first one won the 2018 Agatha Award for Best Short Story. I'm not sure whether it's the first or the second one that's up on the homepage of the website right now. They're set in Montana in the mid-1880s. And I don't know how long those will be up. I'm redoing the website, updating it a little bit, and I'll put a different short story up. So there will always be a free short story available on the website, but it might be a different one. So act now.
That's awesome. Who doesn't need a short story right now?
I love meeting with readers, and I love chatting with other writers. So it's just really wonderful to have been here with you this morning, Ellie, and to have been here with all the lovely readers who I can't see, but I'm picturing nonetheless.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too. And thanks to all of you readers.
She's such a gem. Okay, let's see. That was so great. I will share all of Leslie's info, like I said, and I know some of you already have her new book on the way. So maybe that's what you'll be cozying up to this weekend. In terms of what's coming up next, we have our last final draft, our short story that we've been collaborating on since August. That is going to take place this coming Tuesday, October. I almost said December. I think I'm still, it's Reba. It's Reba. It's Christmas. No, that it will be at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come join the party. I'm going to read the last pages of the story collaboration, and we're going to have a Bavarian Halloween feast. Then a week from today, I'm going to do a special 5 things where you can ask me anything. I have Abby Collette coming up. And then on November 10th, we're going to have a party for Without a Brew. It is out on November 10th, and I can't wait to share it with you. And then last but not least, there will be some other things mixed into. I have quite the endeavor planned for December 1st to kick off the holiday season. We are going to write a one-night mystery together here live. You are going to write it with me. We're going to try to do it in one night. We'll see if it's fun or a train wreck and total disaster, but either way, it'll be great, I'm sure. As always, thanks for joining me for a 5 Things Friday. Enjoy your weekend and happy reading.